I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the MG Cyberster electric Roadster, which we have for 24 hours. MG said that if you don't really like our products now, not actually in those words, but if you don't like us now, wait till you see what's coming. And so far we've already had the MG3, the new Gen HS, and this Cyberster, and they are light years ahead of the products they replace. This doesn't really replace anything. The last MG Roadster was the TF. The most successful MG Roadster was the MGB, and that finished in 1980, but this arrives perfectly in time for MG's 100th anniversary, and if you didn't know that, it's written down the sill on the side of both sides of the car. What makes the Cyberster cool, I think, is not only the fact that it looks so cool. In my opinion, I think it looks great. This one here is English white, which actually isn't really white. It's like a really light beige, like a mid-century beige. I think that's great. It's actually the strawberries and cream version because it's got the strawberry roof with the creamy kind of body. It has scissor doors, it has four-wheel drive, it has 725 Newton meters worth of torque, 3.2 seconds 0 to 100. It does cost $115,000. However, this is a little bit of theatre on wheels, and I don't think you could have said that about any MG other than maybe an older one that had caught fire by the side of the road, which we hope won't happen today because electric vehicles don't burn. Anywho, I haven't really driven this car yet. The point of this test is me experiencing the Cyberster for the first time and talking to you on camera and saying my first impressions, because we don't have long with the car, so let's get to it.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
If the beauty is in the details, then the Cyberster does have some really cool elements about it. Speaking of, the front LED lighting is pretty cool, full LED. They do stand out quite nicely. I reckon it sits really well with the front end, which has an opening bonnet but doesn't have any storage in there. It just has a big plastic codpiece and a couple of flimsy covers for the windscreen wiper fluid, and that sort of stuff don't go in there. The star of the show though is the doors. They are scissor doors. You can operate them by pressing that button on the side there. You can do it from the key fob, you can close it from inside the door here, and you can do it from the console. So there isn't really any excuse to say I don't know how to get in and out of the car. However, it isn't really quite as easy as you may think, which you'll notice when we get in the car. If you're wondering whether the door has any kind of clue that it might open itself into concrete, it does have a sensor here and one here. So if you hit open and then kind of put something there, it'll stop. And if you want it to keep going, you push the button twice. And if you thought the front lights were distinctive, check out the ones at the back. They say they're inspired by the Union Jack, but I can't really see it. It just looks like a pair of arrows to me, like I might go this way today and I might go that way tomorrow. So read of that as you will. When the brake goes on, it does this band along the top, and when the blinker goes on, I was kind of hoping it'd run along and slide up the end like super dorky, but it doesn't. It just does this little banded V section here, but that is very distinctive, and I really think it helps the Cyberster stand out. The badging here for Cyberster, written in cursive, is very Porsche-like. It does look a little bit like I drew it, but it's still kind of a neat detail. Really like the big MG octagon on the top of the back here. When the strawberries and cream roof folds down, it just completely nestles into its own little section here. It doesn't impact the boot, and when you look in here, it's not huge, but it's 249 litres. It's actually reasonably deep, it's flat, it's evenly shaped, it has nothing under the floor, but for what it is, given the amount of electric stuff going on underneath in here, it's actually pretty good, and it all feels pretty good quality too. Now, while these doors make it arguably easy to get into tight spaces because they don't have to swing that way, it isn't entirely easy to get in and out of the car. This is the easiest way because there's no roof. So you can get in here, sort of grab the handle on the door and go that way. But when the roof's in place, you really do have to duck down and have a sort of a technique to be able to get in here. That's one of those cases where the older you are, the easier it is to afford it, but it's also the more difficult to get in and out of it. Similar to the outside, the Cyberster's interior continues that sort of sense of theatre, and in particular here, colour. Because we have the English white with the red roof, we've got red suede all through here and all over the seats. We've got this really cool red leather steering wheel, which I think looks awesome. I love the colouring of this interior, although this is a little bit perhaps slightly brown for my liking. The way the dash is set out is kind of a little bit like someone designed it before they forgot it had to have a steering wheel. Because when you're here and you're driving along and you need to access stuff on this side, I found myself sort of leaning to the right to get around it. And this side does something completely different. We do have the icons running down both sides, but the steering wheel very much cuts out either side here and there. We do have another screen down here where we can go between a ventilation screen where you just scroll up and down the temperature, or a button that says car where you can do the MG pilot, the seating, the instrument cluster, ambient lighting, driving modes, one pedal drive, ESC off, all that sort of stuff. It's actually surprisingly good. That works brilliantly. This looks pretty good in both of its modes. These, it has an 8-speaker Bose stereo, which sounds really good. I love the grills on the doors. They're really metallicized and feel nice and cold. We've got speakers all over the dash, speakers in the bulkhead behind us here, but it's wired Apple CarPlay and it's through a USB-A down here. I just kind of thought that was very odd in a brand new car, and particularly because I didn't bring my USB-A cord, so I'm playing through Bluetooth like it's 2011. The controls for the transmission are down here. It's a little bit like an old Chrysler Talk Flight where it's push button and clunking bits and pieces. It all kind of works quite well after a while. Being an MG, there is no start button. You just put your foot on the brake, and when you want to turn it all off with the stereo blaring, you just lock the car and it all shuts itself down. The controls in the center here, the middle ones for the roof, nice and big, really easy to use. The outside ones have got little door open icons with the scissor doors. Again, they match with the ones at the bottom of the door, but these are the ones you use mainly in the car. You want the door to go up, you lift it up. You want the door to go down, you push it down. It's relatively simple and logical. This section here has this sort of patterning like it's sort of kitchen Formica from 1995, and that is neither here nor there. It's just my opinion about the patterning of it. The driving position too is a little bit flawed in that because we're in an electric Roadster, we've got batteries in the floor. So the seat right here is as low as it will go. And I feel like I would want it to go about that much lower to really be sitting on the floor, but you just can't do it. And you can't lift the under thigh either, because these Mercedes-like buttons on the door here that do the electric seat adjustment only lift the back of the seat, not the front of it. So that's not ideal. Do have 2-setting memory here, just got normal window switches here. Most of the stuff is all pretty easy to use. The controls on the steering wheel are typical MG in that they don't really have any markings. You sort of need to know what does what. This one here, Super Sport, I've only pushed it once but haven't used it yet. We'll do that when we drive it. It does bring up a big 10,000 RPM tacho, which is kind of pointless in an EV, but does it all the same. This one here does absolutely nothing. I don't know what that does yet. I've just been pushing it and I can't see anything change. So we'll see if we can work that out when we're playing with the modes while we're driving. The rest of it, storage, just 2 cup holders here. This bit in here with the USB-A and USB-C. Got a little section behind us here with netted bits. Another speaker in the middle of the bulkhead. There's a takeaway hook there. 2 other little flaps that kind of look like they're manual override for the doors, perhaps. I've got a wind cheater here. Yeah, it's all pretty good. The finish is nice. It looks nice. It's reasonably quiet when you're in here. I think it kind of fits the fact that it does cost more than 6 figures, especially for an MG. It's unlike no other MG, and that's what MG or anyone who buys this car would have wanted it to be. 24 hours in the MG Cyberster, and we're heading out onto some curvy roads. But before we get into the curves, let's talk about some of the raw data for the car. It has a 77 kilowatt hour battery embedded in the floor between the axles. It has only 113 millimeters of ground clearance, so it sits pretty close to the road. It has front and rear electric motors and all-wheel drive. That's the only spec coming to Australia, which is the top spec internationally. The front electric motor produces 150 kilowatts and 250 newton meters. The rear electric motor produces 250 and 475 newton meters, so it's clearly rear biased. The total is 375 kilowatts and 725 newton meters. Even weighing just under 2,000 kilos, Those outputs are good enough for the Cyberster to go from 0 to 100 in a claimed 3.2 seconds. MG also says it has a top speed of 208 kilometers an hour, although that's completely academic. No one really cares about that, and that's not really what this vehicle is about. It also rides on high quality Pirelli P0 tyres, 245/40 at the front, 275/35 at the back. And while I couldn't find the brake disc diameter anywhere in the specs before driving this, it is wearing 20-inch wheels. It does have Brembo front brake calipers. The suspension is double wishbone at the front, multi-link at the back. It doesn't have adaptive dampers, but it does have drive modes. You can adjust the steering through 3 settings. It has comfort and sport and a custom. So there is a reasonable amount of adjustability here. The KERS flap on the left of the steering wheel does adjust the regenerative braking across 4 different levels. However, we've just got it on 1 pedal mode here, and it's not currently working at the moment according to the dash. This car's only done 700 kilometers, so probably might need some kind of a reflash. There are a few other things that also are lit up in orange in front of me. On the left it says A and S and 1. I don't actually really know what those mean, but they may be related to the KERS because I can't get it to change from S. And this is the whole point of this test, is to get in the car, not know anything about it. So I'm learning as I go. The steering wheel button on the left here, I don't know what it does. I still don't know what it does. I push it and I can't see anything change. I know that it doesn't have adaptive dampers because the custom setting down here doesn't allow you to change the damping settings. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Finally, to the electric credentials of this vehicle. Its claimed kilowatt hour per 100 kilometre consumption is 19.1. So far we've been averaging sort of 21-ish, which is not too bad. Its WLTP range claim is 443. It only takes 144 kilowatts DC charging though, that's its maximum, and it does take 40 minutes to go from 10 to 80%. So not really at the cutting edge of charging speed, but definitely right at the cutting edge in terms of accelerative speed, which we will find out right now. Because there are a few little electrical foibles in this very low kilometre car, we can't test launch control, but I am going to give it a go in Super Sport and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to stomp on it, and it does take a little bit to grab, but once it's going, it's pretty insistent. You can see how it would punch itself off the line if it wasn't in Super Sport. But you know, even driving it in comfort, it still seems to have pretty good throttle response. Maybe not having it in full Super Sport, even just having it in comfort, like you put your foot down and the throttle response is really good and actually quite exponential. It's not just like turning on a switch. It eases into it, but it does it with urgency. It's not like turbo lag in an EV or, like I said, turning on a light switch. It actually is nicely progressive. The steering in comfort, it turns in pretty well. There's no turning circle claim that I can find, but it is quite tight. It has 2.75 turns lock to lock, but it doesn't feel like it's low gear. You get to a point in a corner like here where you turn it in, and it has weight to it and it has resistance to it, but it doesn't really have any feel. Whereas if we go to sport, it instantly gives it a little bit of resistance in there. It doesn't feel sort of so slack, even though it isn't really slack. It just feels sort of fluid and light. Sport definitely gives it a bit more, but it isn't about full-on Roadster feedback, the Cyberster. It is more about being a high-tech and very cool car, which I think it really does nail. Now I can feel the steering in sport, and it is a little bit heavy, I suppose, almost a little bit springy. I liked the way in comfort in a straight line, going back to that, it was sort of nicely relaxed. But then I feel like it would have been better if it could more naturally weight up in corners. Again, we're coming here to electric steering where it has settings where just one perfect setting would probably be the best. And I just feel like sometimes this is really just about box ticking and putting stuff in a brochure or to appease the iPad generation or whatever they're called now. Custom has a whole bunch of different modes, including a track mode for power. It has light, standard and heavy sport for the steering. Heavy sport is what it's in now, and it seems, yeah, heavyish. Again, we're just about to get to some corners and they're really quite bumpy. So we will be judging both the body control of this and the steering and the drive out of corners. What we don't have here is curves, so we can't adjust the regenerative braking, and we don't have launch control, but we do have the car and no adaptive dampers. So here we go. I can hear that wind noise behind me. It's a bit of road noise. No adaptive dampers, so bump through the front suspension. The balance of the car though is really good. Like the turn in, you can feel it sitting on its outside back wheel, which is exactly what you want to do. So far we can't feel the fact that it weighs 1985 kilos, so that's a good thing. Has a nice little sort of pivot through that corner there where it turns in, and the way that it's shuffling torque between the front and rear electric motors actually feels really engaging. I like it. I am using full brakes here though. I've got no real regenerative braking help, unfortunately, which, you know, is part of the enjoyment of an EV, which is a shame. Anyway, that's all in comfort. Let's go to sport. Instantly, much sharper throttle response. The steering's heavier. The suspension will be the same. Steering is heavier, but I think I kind of liked comfort better. Now we're going to give it a go in custom, which means power track, not just sport, and heavy sport for the steering. It is quick. It doesn't snap your neck, which I like. Like 3.2, that's going to be all in the launch control bit at the bottom. The actual power of it while you're driving is really nicely progressive and smooth like an EV. The suspension is pure because it doesn't have adaptive dampers, but it has, so far, the body control is pretty good. It's only crashed through once, a little thump at the front, but this is a really challenging road. There's a lot of bumps in it. The braking feel is pretty consistent, nice and progressive. It's nice and natural, but even though it's not natural, but it feels natural. It just has this nice progression to it. And when you need that extra bit of steering lock too, like there, it really does tuck itself in. I can't see how anyone can really complain about the dynamics of the Cyberster. Like, it's not an MX-5, but it's not trying to be either. It's just happens to be a Roadster. It's almost, that's just incidental, that part of it. Last but not least, we're going to try the Cyberster with the roof down, because that is what it's all about. The roof is actually pretty quick. It's nice and neat. Actually feels pretty good quality. Slots into its little spot. Keeps the windows down. Completed. See, it is mostly rear drive. I like the way that the windscreen sits in front of you here, so you've got that air above your head. We are on a narrow road here, so you can hear the clicking of the cat's eyes in the middle. The wind noise is not so bad. We've got a windbreaker built in behind us there, just that little slot. It feels airy and open and everything you want a Roadster to be. And if I put the windows up to minimize some of the wind rustle, well, it's actually really quiet even. We're only doing 70 kilometers an hour, but it's actually quiet. It does what it says on the tin, even though I'm sure that most of it isn't metal. And I reckon the Cyberster is actually surprisingly likable, more than likable. It's actually a pretty good thing. So, 24 hours in an MG Cyberster GT, which is what I think the top spec all-wheel drive version is called. No name for Australia because we only get one, and it's $115,000. What do I think of that car? I think the more time I spend in it, the more that I like it. I really like the design of it. In fact, I really love the outside styling of it. I think the interior is cool. It's pretty refined. It's actually really fun to drive and also really easy to drive in traffic. It's a surprisingly livable and likable vehicle that really does have some dynamic DNA. It's like taking the platform that the MG4 opened for the brand, i.e. the only vehicle that drives any good, and then suddenly becomes this whole other level. Does it drive like a traditional MG Roadster? No, not at all. We can only be thankful for that. It's completely its own thing. It also doesn't drive like any other MG. The only thing that I can think of is the column stalks from an MG4, and I kind of find them nicely familiar. So what you have here is a little bit of theatre, a little bit of rarity. MG says 30% of what's coming to Australia has already been sold, but they didn't say what number that is. So it may be 3, but at the same time, those 3 people, if it is 3, are going to be driving this really cool car here. And I think that it deserves to be celebrated because it's different. And that's something that's really great in 2024, because it seems everyone wants everyone to be the same and be conservative, and that is not conservative at all. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video. Hit the notification bell and tell us what you think about the MG Cyberster. Do you think MG should have even bothered? Do you think Roadsters are great? Would you buy an electric Roadster? Or tell us what you think about chasing cars. Thanks for watching.